Present solutions for AI harms fall under two categories: substantive regulations and legal liability. But you have said that these solutions are inadequate. How do you believe that these approaches fall short, and what are the limitations of traditional methods in addressing AI related issues?
When we think about litigation, a core premise to litigation is the idea that the harm has to already have happened before we can bring some kind of lawsuit, whether it is something that the government brings or a private actor brings against another private actor. So that feels a little too late in the process. We don't want to wait for these harms to happen, especially because given the scope and reach of AI, if the harm has already happened to one person, chances are the harm has happened to countless people. And so the goal is to avoid that, not wait for it to happen and then try to fix it. The second reason is if we wait for the harm to happen and try to fix it, it's actually very difficult to kind of revert back to different versions of AI. Once AI has been advanced to a certain point, it's hard to teach it to unlearn certain behavior or forget certain kinds of information. And so basically the way the product is that caused harm, it's going to end up staying that way. And chances are when something exists, we have a hard time making the decision, oh, this has to go away forever. And what that means is even if it causes harm, we're going to try to find excuses or justifications that this still is overall beneficial for society. And that means that we are not forcing people to, at the beginning of the development process, be more careful. Another limitation on litigation is the fact that the way AI harms happen, sometimes the individual doesn't realize that they have been harmed. So for example, influence campaigns are very sophisticated. And what they involve is somebody trying to manipulate somebody else's thoughts or beliefs through subtle communication strategies. And so if this is something that AI is being used or for example, an AI, like a ChatGPT version, is trying to convince people in the public that they should not vote in the election, the public doesn't know that they're being manipulated. They just think that, oh, this is a really interesting point that this bot is making, and it ends up influencing a large number of people. And so if you don't know that you've been manipulated, you can't bring a lawsuit for that. Another issue is in litigation, it is often the burden on the person who's bringing the lawsuit to prove that it was the defendant, whoever they're suing, that caused them harm. But with AI, it's hard to show that this AI is what caused you specifically the harm. We know that it is capable of causing harm generally, but to provide sufficient evidence that ties that AI to what happened to you can be difficult. Like, for example, there's a lot of concern about mental health and physical health concerns with minors. Eating disorders are very rampant, especially in younger populations. And they often use AI tools to learn new methods of kind of manifesting their eating disorders. And so to prove that AI is making their physical health worse by teaching them how to either restrict food intake or anything else, the defendant's just going to say, well, you've been doing this even before you started talking to AI. How can you prove that the AI is what caused your harm, even though we know instinctively that they must have played some role? And then regulation is generally anticipatory. It's trying to anticipate things that are going to happen in the future and to create requirements or restrictions around it. But while I think regulation is very, very important, regardless of which government we are talking about, it is relatively slow for the government to be able to draft something, get enough agreement on it, put it into place, have the ability to start enforcing it. This is challenging because the government tends to not have a lot of technical expertise. They tend to not have a lot of resources. And so they can't enforce it against all companies. They have to pick and choose which ones they are going to enforce it against. Sometimes they are basing their assumptions on the technology today, but in 5 years, the technology could be so different that it's no longer, their assumptions are no longer relevant. Like 5 years ago, there was a small portion of the population that knew that generative AI was on the horizon, but the average person wasn't thinking about generative AI until OpenAI released ChatGPT. And then this kind of new era of generative AI everywhere exists. But if we had passed an AI bill in 2018, chances are it wouldn't have anticipated the way that it's being used today. So that's why I think that both of those avenues are a little limited.